Okay, everybody, here we go. We are live with another round of Astro-Babble. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on Facebook and Instagram, as well as watching the replay on YouTube. We're here with another 8 charts. Thank you to everybody who continues to share, like the videos, and submit charts of friends, family, as well as children, pets, anybody who you have that exact birth date, place, and time for. And basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking for about an hour about what we see in these astrological charts. We have these 8 random charts, which I generated in my Solar Fire Astro software, and we're going to be looking at what makes them tick via their natal placements. And again, if you would like to be in the queue, feel free to send in your birth date, place, and time as well. I do need an exact birth time, and for those of you overseas, make sure to spell out the month and day so we don't get the numbers confused on that. And yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing. If you have questions, comments, concerns, if you'd like to book a private reading, feel free to shoot me an email via sam@scorpiorisingastrology.com, or check out my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. I have lots of online classes as well if you're interested in astrology. Hey, Steve. Hey, everybody. Jumping on. Thank you so much for your support. And let's get into the first chart, shall we? Don't select 2 charts at once, Sam. Okay. Michaela was born 11 a.m. in Brattleboro. Yeah, let's go with that. Woo, Scorpio. So we have, I just get so excited when Scorpio is featured. So we have Ascendant Scorpio, Jupiter Scorpio, North Node Scorpio, Pluto Scorpio, all in the first house. Absolutely love it. As well as, get this, everybody, a Mars in Cancer, technically the sign of its detriment. I know. But when we look at that Mars in Cancer at 13 degrees, making a good trine to that Jupiter and that North Node in Cancer, that's some really good synastry, Michaela. In fact, if you haven't considered astrology, spiritual studies, working with travel, higher education, you totally should, because that placement is just absolutely rocking. However, it is in detriment. So we need to be aware that martial quality that rules your chart is very tempered. Normally, when we see Mars ruling the chart, there is a fire that's present, but it seems like with such heavy Scorpio placements and the Lord of your chart being in the sign of its detriment, you might find a lot of those Mars qualities misdirected. The fire that Mars brings forward, or should bring forward, is dampened, especially from a medical perspective. We find that Mars in Cancer brings a lot of heat into the stomach, and can lead to things like acid reflux, ulcers, things that are fiery or corrosive that irritate the stomach lining in Cancer. So that's just something that we need to be aware of. But overall, I mean, your goal this time around, Michaela, is to master the self. We have that North Node in Scorpio in the first house. I enjoy seeing that because it's an easy way for me to work with clients to say, hey, you've got the North Node in the first house of self, the body. It's all about you mastering you this time around. We have that the north of your personal compass is pointed towards that first house of personality, of self-development, of physical health. But because of that as well, medical placements are a little bit more important for you, Michaela, because we have all of this Scorpio energy coming forward, which is bringing a lot of your body's attention into small intestine, bladder, sinus, reproductive, those body systems. Again, kind of a double digestive hit with that ruler of your chart, Mars up in Cancer in the 9th. So yeah, that's a lot to cover right off the bat. Yeah, we do have some hidden grace in your chart, Michaela. We have Venus in Libra. We love to see a good Venus in Libra, but Venus in Libra is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, as well as the moon at 9 degrees of Libra and Mercury at 5 degrees in Libra. So that 12th house is rather active. We have that 12th house of, again, hidden enemies, hospitalizations, as well as karmic healing, containing the moon, Mercury, the planet of the mind and communication, Venus, that planet of love, relationships, all things beautiful. So the idea of self-image potentially being compromised, the idea of the emotions being hidden from the self, and also the mind working in mysterious ways, especially from a Libra context, that indecision quality, which tends to be, again, worst enemy or self-inflicted detriment from that perspective. I think we have good chemistry though with your process, Michaela, and what I mean by that is we have the sun in Virgo here in the 11th house of friendships. So we have this natural charisma that you bring to social situations, but because that Mercury in Libra is ruling that sun in Virgo in the 11th, I think that part of your and also the MC, the sun is ruling the MC in the 10th. I think that part of what you do really well is in your friend groups and social groups is you use all of that Scorpio energy, you use all of that Mars and Cancer, that slightly aggressive mama bear energy, and you're able to help people through their bullshit. You're able to help people through their problems in a way that only somebody with a sun in Virgo and all of these Scorpio placements can, somebody who's uniquely qualified to help other people, maybe potentially on a mass scale as well, with that 11th house ruling large groups, work through their issues. And that's definitely part of your skill set, as it were. We do have strong maternal placements with that Jupiter and Scorpio ruling Saturn in that 5th house of children, family, as well as sexuality, creativity. Saturn is in Pisces. Saturn is also retrograde, not necessarily ideal, but they're having that first house connection, and Jupiter ruling Saturn as well does mitigate that slightly because Jupiter has the exact opposite energy of Saturn, bringing a little bit more construction to that otherwise detrimental Saturnian energy. It's also a day chart, so when we look at sect, Saturn is much nicer during the day, versus that Mars, the ruler of your chart, is actually much fiercer during the day. So that Mars in Cancer, again, that detriment. When it comes to higher learning, Michaela, one of the things that you might find super annoying is the fact that you keep getting in fights with the content that you're trying to learn. And I totally get it, but one of the things that needs to be understood about that placement is that Mars and Cancer being in detriment makes things not easy for those ninth house topics like travel, like foreigners, like higher education, spirituality. But if you can let your Scorpio energy kind of pull that content into the subconscious, digest it a little bit, and not rely on that Mars impulse to immediately attack things that are different from you or that don't necessarily fit with your current paradigm, you'll be able to be a lot more successful if that Mars is tempered like it should be in that Cancer placement. But if you try to treat it like a normal Mars and use that kind of attack first, ask questions later approach, then it's not really constructive to the other placements in your chart for sure. Let's see. We do have Neptune and Uranus in Capricorn retrograde in the 3rd. I know those placements intimately because I have Uranus and Neptune as well retrograde in Capricorn in the 3rd with my Scorpio rising. Michaela was born just a couple years after me, and because of that, when we look at the outer planets move very slowly. They're the generational planets where everybody within your age group has that same aspect. So we really need to look at that creatively, but those outer planets are in different houses based on ascendant location. So in that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, we have Neptune, that planet that tends to muddy, confuse, that tends to bring a fantasy aspect to the words that are weaved very, very succinctly, but also can sometimes confuse people. And Uranus, that communication style, that writing, teaching style, that is very shocking, that is very uprooting, that is very somewhat detrimental, but detrimental in a good way. That natural disaster energy that Uranus brings to the surface in writing, teaching, communication. I always associated it with throwing in a couple F-bombs whenever you talk. That really gets people's attention, Michaela, just in case you haven't tried that. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we covered a lot of good stuff in Michaela's chart. Thank you, Michaela, for entering in your stuff. Thank you, everybody who is messaging me right now. Hello, Steve. Hello, Albert, Kim, Helen, Lisa, Amelia, everybody who's jumping on Facebook, Instagram. I appreciate you, love you. Let's continue to work through our charts this morning. We're on chart number 2. Let's speaking of Amelia, let's talk about Amelia. How you doing, honey? We have 11:39 a.m. Also, interestingly enough, in Brattleboro, the exact same place as our first chart. However, the birth dates are very, very different. The birth times are very, very different, and therefore we have a very different chart. So just because somebody's born in the same place does not mean that they have the same energy. Specifically with Amelia, we have a Pisces stellium up in the 10th house of career. How exciting. And we have some interesting squares with the ascendant. That's tricky. So we have the MC, the moon, the sun, Mercury, as well as the South Node, all in Pisces, all in that 10th house of success. Being ruled, by Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 7th. That's fun. Really, when we see the 7th house and the 10th house connected, there's going to be some level of success with the spouse, or the spouse will be the idea of having a long-term relationship is associated with Amelia's long-term idea of success. Unfortunately, we need to talk about some of this watery energy that's pervading the chart, and I think that this is something that needs to be understood because it's South Node territory, not North Node territory. So there's conflict when it comes to Amelia's life path and how to integrate this water appropriately. We have a new moon chart. So this means that the moon is naturally hidden. The emotions are going to be withdrawn. They are not going to be forthright. And I don't like to see, like, as somebody who has a Cancer new moon in their chart, I don't like to see other people with new moon water placements, because water is naturally very hidden. It's a very deep element. It's not something that coughs up feelings easily, and also it's also a very emotional element in general. So when we have a new moon in a water sign in somebody's chart, that makes it doubly difficult to get to dredge up all of those feelings, especially in the mutable Pisces sign, which has zero direction whatsoever. It's not as bad as a Scorpio in terms of withholding, but that idea of that new moon in Pisces up in the 10th, very close to the MC, that's going to make it very emotionally difficult for Amelia to let those feelings be seen. And I don't really enjoy that placement, especially because the planet that is ruling that chart is in the 7th house of relationships. So finding that Amelia naturally hides her feelings from her spouse is one of the potential lower octave placements for that new moon Pisces up in the 10th. We also have Mercury here in Pisces, and Mercury is in its detriment in Pisces, the worst possible sign that Mercury could be in. So the mind is not as focused as well. So the mind is not necessarily as focused. The emotions are very deep, but also very hidden. There's a lot of watery excess in the chart that I think needs to be channeled very, very appropriately. And this is all something that's associated with the South Node. Mercury is actually exactly conjoining the South Node up in the 10th. So a lot of this spiritual stuff, a lot of this emotional depth, a lot of this mystery, a lot of this kind of darker hidden water energy that Pisces thrives in is all old news in terms of Amelia's chart. She's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. It's not where she's going, which is where I think the interesting dynamic is between her Jupiter at 29, her ascendant at 26 Gemini, and her North Node at 24 Virgo down in the 4th. There's this really interesting cross section in the chart where we see she's trying to escape that idea of letting that hidden, mysterious kind of fortune teller energy that a new moon in Pisces in the 10th would bring about, and transmute that into something a little bit more productive, transmute that into something that's a little bit more grounded, that Virgo 4th house energy where roots can be established, where integrity can be established, where guidelines can be established. And I think having that Gemini ascendant, naturally having that opposition with that Jupiter in Sag in the 7th, a partner who is almost a little bit that has that Jupiterian groundedness, that bulk, that inflammation that a Jupiter Sag naturally brings, but something that can remind her, like, look, there is something that is other than the etheric. There is a potential for other things to exist besides these subtle impulses that Pisces thrives on. We need to get something a little bit more grounded into Amelia's chart, especially because she's got that Neptune and Scorpio retrograde in the 6th. There's all of this rogue water energy that's playing into the chart, way too much mutability that needs to be grounded. And unfortunately, that Saturn in Capricorn, the densest, most weighed down part of her chart, besides her Pluto in Virgo, which is retrograde in the 4th, that Saturn in Capricorn up in the 8th of taxes, of death, of business, of estates, of those, a lot of those tangible resources cannot be seen by the ascendant. It's an aversion to the ascendant. So we need to tap into that place through that 9th house of teaching, travel, higher education, experiencing the way that other people see the world, experiencing that idea of other cultures who might be able to lend a hand to Amelia's overly watery energy, overly mutable energy, get a little bit more structure in place, get a little bit more of that density woven into the chart, where there is ritual, there is focus, there are priorities of family, as opposed to that overwhelming mutability that tends to capsize a lot of charts. We need to formulate that north node direction downward into the 4th of family, of home, access that Pluto around 50, and mature the chart in a way that is not as watery, not as mutable up in the 10th, but bring it down into the 4th house of family, where we start to get, again, those roots to take place, the self to take shape, and we mature the chart in a less mutable fashion instead of relying on those mutable skills throughout the life, which is easy. It's the easy way out, but astrology isn't about taking the easy way out. Yes, those are skills, but the skills need to be used towards a fixed end, towards a grounded end in Amelia's chart, where we really sink into that 4th house, that midnight place of the chart, where everything becomes private, becomes family oriented, and we circle the wagons to make sure that she develops a stable, sustainable lifestyle. Good stuff. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I appreciate you. Yes. If you'd like to submit your chart for the queue, just send me a private message. Do not put your birth date, place, and time in the comments, because that is a violation of privacy. Let's move on to our 3rd chart in the queue. We've got Luke. How you doing, Luke? Salute, Luke. We have 8:21 p.m. in Dearborn. Okay. Lots of watery energy in the charts this morning. So we've got a Pisces ascendant with a south node in that 1st house, making Jupiter the ruler of the chart. Jupiter is in Aquarius retrograde in the 12th. That's a sticky placement. And that actually, Luke, this is something that came up in the chart readings the other day in terms of an out of control sense of intuition and psychic skills. And unfortunately, this is something that we're going to need to talk about in your chart as well. Pisces is often accused of being the most spiritual sign in the zodiac. I disagree with that for a couple reasons. The spirituality and the connection to the ethers that Pisces has is almost like a jellyfish. It's just something where Pisces kind of floats around in that auric field of the different veils of reality and picks up the flotsam and jetsam that floats by. It's not an active intuition like a Cancerian empathy or a pointed fixed intuition like a Scorpio who's probing the subconscious. Instead, Pisces is just kind of here floating along and absorbing the psychic airways. And because we have that Lord of the chart in the 12th house of hidden enemies, but also the 12th house is a very spiritual house. It's that house of things that are hidden, of things that are dark, of things that are mysterious, of things that need to be healed, need to be rectified. And because we have the Lord of the chart here, there's personality issues in terms of being one's own worst enemy, but also we have Uranus and Aquarius here and Jupiter and Aquarius here. Both are retrograde. Aquarius is also one of those telepathic signs that I see a lot. So we see psychic skills in the chart for Luke. Unfortunately, those psychic skills are unpredictable with Uranus. They are big and inflated because of Jupiter, and the South Node in the first in Pisces being ruled by that Jupiter means that this is something that Luke came in with baggage wise. This is something that has previously been mastered but needs to be rehashed out in the chart. So, first thing I'm going to recommend to Luke is getting very, very up on your psychic skills. Not necessarily in terms of defense. I don't like the idea of psychic protection because the idea of us needing to defend ourselves from the bad things is a fear mentality. And as somebody who's very intuitive, it's not something that I find personally helpful to fear those things that I'm sensing. That's not constructive. So one thing that I would recommend with Luke is to really get up on your meditation, really involve yourself in spiritual practices that embrace the psychic skills that you naturally have at your disposal, so that you can work with those constructively, be around peer groups and tribes that are able to help you nurse those skills, but also acknowledge that, hey, you're not going crazy. This is something that is normal. This is something that is a human potential that everybody has, but not everybody has to the degree naturally that you have it. So that hypersensitivity aspect of the ascendant 12th house dynamic is something that Luke needs to be very, very spot on with, very, very aware of. Otherwise, we're not going to get past that and unlock the other aspects of the chart, because unfortunately you can't perform well at work when you're worried about the big nasties in yourself, as well as other people that are kind of coming to get you. So we need to create a little bit less of a heightened state around the natural intuitive gifts in Luke's chart. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Let's talk about all of this seventh house stuff. We have Mercury retrograde, but Mercury is in Virgo, the sign of its exaltation. Absolutely excellent, as well as the sun in Virgo in the seventh and the North Node in Virgo in the seventh. This talks to me about Luke. One of the big things that we're going to need to work on is the idea that your highest purpose this time around is to develop a successful relationship. And to understand what it means to open yourself up in a way to another person, kind of warts and all. That's one of the big challenges of your life personally, but it is something that you're going to need to do eventually, as you start to unwind your more difficult placements, your psychic placements, the idea of your intuition and your layers of reality being different from a lot of people, being more extreme than a lot of people. Not everybody that you seek out as a life partner is going to understand that. And I totally get that. The idea of people saying, well, you're just weird. Well, you're just crazy. Well, I'm not really into that stuff. I don't really believe in that. It's not about belief. It's about working with what you got, honey. It's about working with the cards that you were dealt. And when it comes to you dealing with this hand, we need to sort out the first house, 12th house psychic stuff. And then once you get a good handle on who you are as a person, we need to then show that, bare the soul to somebody else as the greatest challenge of your life mission. That is something that I think is difficult in your chart specifically, but nobody said life was going to be easy. I think there are ways that we can do this constructively, one of which is relying on the family dynamic, and specifically ancestor medicine, if you wanted to play that card. Because I think with that moon in Gemini down in 26 degrees in the fourth house being ruled by that retrograde Mercury in the seventh, I think that being introduced to your potential spouse through the family who can recognize your gifts, who can protect you from people who would not necessarily be in your favor, and potentially, like I said, working with that bloodline, working with ancestral medicine to ground some of those skills, but to also understand, like, there are people who came before you in your lineage who have dealt with the same exact thing and recovered, not just recovered, but thrived because of it. But also using family as a filter to understand who you should have in your life, because they'll know best. And they'll be the ones who will be able to direct you into the ideal relationships from that perspective. And that's something that we see a lot when the seventh and the fourth are connected. That house of relationships in the seventh, that house of family in the fourth, being introduced to a spouse via a family member. Let's see. And when it comes to money, money money is heavy, money is difficult. It's not going to get easy until that first Saturn return, because you do have Saturn in Aries retrograde in the second house of finance. So skimping out on a lot of stuff, saving a lot, not being impulsive with your cash flow, but understanding that a lot of your ninth house stuff is going to be connected to your second house stuff. So that ninth house of travel, higher education, foreigners, potentially dealing with a lot of college debt, because that ninth house, second house are connected with Saturn and Mars, the two malefics. But we have this martial energy in Scorpio, this Saturnian Aries energy. They're working together, but they're not easy planets to work with. So although in the long run, you might actually make a lot of money from embracing your spirituality, potentially becoming a college professor, traveling a lot, tutoring others, as well as exploring foreign cultures, that might be how you eventually make a good amount of money. However, for the first 30 years of life, at least, it's going to be difficult with that Saturn placement, because it's not matured, and it is retrograde, and it is being ruled by another malefic. And this is about to be technically this is a night chart. So Saturn is actually the major planet that is malefic in your chart, being in the house of finance. So that's another kind of difficulty stream, especially with that Jupiter being held. But we've got a lot of stuff to work with. We've got a lot of good skills. You just need to learn that a lot of your skills are rare, and they're not going to be easily accepted by others. But that is the end goal of your life, Luke, is to be accepted by that one person who you choose to call your partner. Okay. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Michaela. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Liz. Hi, everybody jumping on. Thank you so much for watching. We're going through our charts. We're doing our daily Astro-Babble, talking about stuff. If you'd like to submit your chart, feel free to send your birth date, place, and time to me, and we will get you into the queue. Let's talk about Kim. How's it going, Kim? Kim was born 9:43 a.m. in New Haven. Woo! And we got a Capricorn stellium. All the stelliums this morning. We're going from, well, and we still have the watery energy in Kim's chart with Scorpio ascendant, Neptune, Scorpio in the first. But now we have all this earth energy in the chart to ground it out. I personally like to see a lot of Scorpio and Capricorn in the chart. Oh, and she's got some Virgo too. I think when the water signs and the earth signs balance each other out, there's more of a synergy in the chart, as opposed to having a one element dominated chart, because earth and water play really nicely together. And I think in Kim's chart, that's where she gets a lot of her power from, because she's got that ascendant in Scorpio, and her ascendant in Scorpio is being ruled by her Mars in Capricorn in the third. Mars is in its exaltation in Capricorn. Crap, it is combust, though. That's difficult. It is conjunct Venus, though, in Capricorn. Little bit of pluses. Saturn is here in Capricorn, just on the cusp of Capricorn, all in the third. That's a really interesting mix. So we need to delve a little bit deeper into Kim's chart. Let's first and foremost talk about this Neptune and Scorpio in the first. So whenever we see Neptune in Scorpio in the first house, whenever we see Neptune in the first house in general, we need to be aware that the medical issues and the metaphysical issues that Neptune brings forward need to be considered, because they're very much in the body and in the life of the native, the person that we're reading for. Neptune brings muddiness, confusion, lack of clarity on the lower end. It also brings a heightened sense of spirituality on the higher end. From a medical perspective, we find that Neptune, especially in Scorpio, deals a lot with addiction, deals a lot with chemical sensitivity. And that's one of the things that Kim's going to need to be very, very acutely aware of, is medications will take at least half the dose to be twice as effective. It's not something that other people will understand, where they're popping, 2-3 sleeping pills just to get an effect, whereas you cut one into fourths and you take it and you're out for 24 hours. That hypersensitivity to medication stimulation. Same thing with caffeine, sugars, alcohols, anything that would enter the body from a subversive or hidden place, and especially Scorpio dealing with a lot of those addiction tendencies. That's something that we need to be aware of. So we're going back to that Mars in Capricorn in the third house of writing, teaching, communication, because that chart ruler is here and the sun is here as well. There is a really strong identification with the skill of writing, teaching, communication in the third house. Also makes her a really great neighbor, just because that third house is that community house, and we that local community house, as opposed to the 11th, which is the broader community house. Let's see what else. The sun combusts the ruler is interesting, because we have this idea of Kim having a couple different parts of the personality, and some of them can't come out to play because others are really domineering. And this is something that we see a lot with the chart ruler combust the sun within 7.5 degrees on either side of the sun, because that chart ruler represents the native. That chart ruler represents who we're talking about in the chart, the planet that rules the sign on the ascendant. And when the sun gets too close to any particular planet, visually we can't see it in the sky. And so that sun placement combusting the ruler, that ego starts to overshadow the sense of self, the true self. Yeah. The person who Kim signed up to be at the beginning, which is that Mars and Capricorn energy, that driven, but that slow driven, kind of old model sports car is a good way to think about it. Like that 1960s 70s Mercury that is just kind of really gaudy, but still goes pretty fast and is shiny, but not too shiny, practical, but not that practical. It's that slow and steady wins the race, but we still got some heat behind the wheel type of energy that Mars comes forward with. But that Sun in Capricorn really burns it up. It starts to overshadow and says, nope, practicality wins the day. We're not going to let that Mars win. We're not going to move forward. Instead, we're going to take a seat back. We're going to shut down all processes until we know exactly what the game plan is, and that's going to frustrate the hell out of that Mars. So I really think, Kim, one of the things that, especially because your North Node in Leo up in the 10th, that sun is ruling it. I think one of the things that you need to learn how to do is to be more active in the spotlight and let that Mars run its course. The things that you've tried to hold back your entire life actually need to be vocalized to fulfill your chart potential, honey. It's not as simple as playing it small. You playing it small in your case, in your chart case, is actually of detriment to your personal placements. We need you to play bigger. We need you to talk about what you want to talk about, especially gender issues and masculine, feminine qualities because of that Mars Venus conjunction down in the third, and Mercury being in the third, just all of this really nice third house energy of writing, teaching, communication. But that sun ruling the North Node in the 10th, it's very much about you stepping into the spotlight, Kim, and you being recognized for all of the hard lessons that you've learned over time. It's unfortunately something that is prone to make you terribly uncomfortable, but that's exactly why you need to do it, because you've held yourself back so long. You've actually purified a lot of the soot and the chaff away from the pearls of wisdom that you've understood throughout your lifetime. And now's the time to really not just hone your craft, but to share it with others. And I think if the less you do that, the more you're going to wonder, well, is my life really worth anything? Because it has the potential to be worth a lot, especially with that 10th house. That 10th house Leo placement with the sun ruling it in the third, like a very prolific writer, you definitely have that potential. But if we don't let that Mars out, if we don't let that action potential out, if we don't embrace your Sagittarius moon in the second, being ruled by Jupiter and Aquarius in the fourth, you've got this great spark to your energy that I think you tend to keep hidden. And again, it comes back to that idea of not playing small, Kim, because you're not one of the people that we need to play small. There are other people out here that we definitely need to play much smaller than they are. But for you, I think it's more about letting it out as opposed to keeping it in as a general theme in your chart. Cool. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I appreciate it. We are 34 minutes in and we're only about halfway, so we need to jump to Kevin. Hey Kevin, how you doing? We got Kevin, who was born at 9:58 a.m. in Bryn Mawr. Let's take a look. Ooh, Virgo stellium. That's why I like you, Kevin. We've got all this Virgo energy. I love a good Virgo. So we have the ascendant at 2 degrees, Jupiter at 6 degrees, Saturn at 21 degrees, Mars at 26 degrees, all in Virgo. That's a pile up for sure. We've got Jupiter, that planet of expansion, making the personality very, very big. We've got Saturn as well, which is this conflict of like the personality wants to expand, but then Saturn in the first also says, nope, got to hold it back, got to temper it, can't be showboaty. And Virgo is specifically about the finer details. So making sure that you understand, like there are two wolves inside of you, Kevin. One that wants to be Jupiterian and loud and obnoxious and very like king on the high horse who's drunk off wine, ha ha ha, big belly laugh. And then Saturn, who is that vizier of the king, who is always in the shadows, who is always looking and observing, that Saturn and Virgo energy, who just wants to be strategic and not necessarily seen, but always consulted for advice, and that wisdom energy. Those two planets are kind of fighting a little bit in your first house of self. And then we've got Mars here as well in Virgo, just putting all of the planets in that space. That drive to succeed is very strong in your chart. But one of the things that I find really interesting about your chart, Kevin, is the chart ruler. You've got Mercury in Cancer retrograde up in the 11th house of friendships, as well as your sun in Cancer in the 11th house of friendships. And that your moon in Pisces over in the 7th is making a trine to that. Like, despite all of this Virgo stuff where you put on this facade of being valuable, of being useful, of wanting to be the person that everybody goes to for all of these things, what people don't understand is that you're this big old softy. And when I say softy, I mean the softest softy that ever did softy. It's that sun in Cancer is such a warm glow, is such a sensitive soul. And then you've got this moon in Pisces, which just adds this watery, intuitive energy to your chart that I think is really beautiful when combined with the sun. And then your chart ruler in Cancer retrograde, sometimes it's difficult for you to take care of people because you feel that if you let people into the inner workings of your mind and you don't keep up that again useful facade, that you're afraid that all of that usefulness will go away. But really that usefulness is just in the personality. It's something that you've constructed in order to navigate the world. It's the ship that you ride. It's not who you are, honey. And that's something that I think is a little bit difficult to understand, because astrology is really good at separating the different parts of the self: the ego, the sun, the emotions, the moon, Mercury, the mind, the ascendant, the personality, and all of them serve a different role in the chart. One is not good, one is not bad. They're all different tools. They're all different parts of the car. Yeah. And you've created this massive story about how useful you are, all of those Virgo placements in the first house. But really, a lot of your inner workings are about the tenderness, or about the care of others, or about coming to the rescue, almost that motherly Cancer energy that wants to be expressed so badly in a group setting. And I think that the more you pay attention to that, the more you'll actually find fulfillment, instead of you relying on those Virgo placements, which are trying to categorize, trying to control, trying to be something that is other than what your soul is asking you to be. But that doesn't mean that all those placements aren't useful. It's a total cop-out, but it's a useful cop-out. It's what we would call a defense mechanism. And your defense mechanism is actually highly valuable. And you know this, but part of the story with astrology is recognizing when to use your skills. And you've put a lot of your skills in the self-development basket when they really need to be put into the vulnerability basket, is a good way to say it. Your North Node in Leo is in that 12th house of karmic healing, hidden enemies, prisons, hospitals. Like a lot of what would fuel you would be outreach to those who are less fortunate. If you're not involved in charity work, if you're not involved in giving back, would highly consider that, because I think it would be very good for some of your placements, emotionally, soul wise, mentally. If you're ever struggling with, gosh, how do I manage my life? How do I take it to the next level? How do I do all these Virgo things where Virgo just wants to be productive, 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 to-do list, to-do list, to-do list, gotta go, gotta do the thing. All of these watery placements in your chart are really asking you to bend down, to kneel in front of those who are less fortunate, and to lift them up, to make them feel that they are seen, to make them feel that they are worthy, that they are valuable, because you've put so much emphasis on yourself. You're the perfect person to say, hey, I see in you what I see in me. And because they see a lot of that value in you, those words coming from you as a person will hit them in a way that will completely change the life. Really good stuff. Absolutely valuable. And I think the more that you work with large groups, because that Mercury in Cancer is ruling that Venus in the 10th, the more that Venus attribute will come forward, the more the beauty in your chart, the love in your chart, the radiance in your chart will come forward. You'll naturally be lucky. You'll naturally be healing that Venusian grace, that lady luck quality of Venus in Gemini. Though Venus in Gemini is retrograde, but it's still a Venus in Gemini. That Venus in Gemini can only be activated when you're in the presence of a large group. Yeah. So that's how we trigger that 10th house success. Cool. Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff about Kevin's chart. Thanks, Kevin, for jumping on and sending in your deets. Let's go ahead and take a quick break to talk about some private stuff. So if you would like to submit your chart for the queue, send in your birth date, place, time for the queue, and I will put you up in it. If you would like to schedule a private consult or check out some of my classes, I'll actually be launching an online class later today, a new one on advanced aspects. You can always go to scorpiorisingastrology.com, my website, and fill out the consultation request form, or check out the online classes. So that's my plug. Let's continue the train, and we'll go to Brian. So Brian was born at 12:08 a.m. in Burlington. Let's say hi to Brian. Okay, Brian. So we've got this Aries ascendant. This Aries ascendant at 28 degrees, being ruled by Mars and Virgo in the 6th. It naturally makes you a workaholic. When we find that ruler of the chart in the 6th house of work, but also health and pets, especially with Virgo being that sign that naturally is associated with our furry friends, that naturally means that the essence of who you are is somebody who is very hardworking, who is very focused on health, who tends to love the aminals. And I think that actually works out really well for you, Brian, because that work ethic is also balanced by this moon in Libra in the 7th house of relationships. This just love to be loved and give love. It's really quite touching, actually. I enjoy that placement immensely. I think it's really, really grand how you've complemented this really strong Aryan part of your chart, where you're so driven, so focused, so in some ways we could think of like narrow-minded, but narrow-minded in a productive way. And then we have this moon in Libra, which just comes in and makes everything super carefree and appreciative and peacekeeping, and just really having that Venusian influence in the chart is just super, super nice. I enjoy that. And then also the Cancer Sun, that you have, the Mercury Cancer that you have in the 4th house, really grounding a lot of this fiery heat and the practicality of family. I'm a fan. I'm a fan, Brian. I enjoy it. The issue here, though, is we have this Saturn in Capricorn that's retrograde in the 10th, opposing this Sun in Cancer in the 4th. By degree, it's an exact opposition. Sun is 15 seconds into that 26 degrees. Saturn is 33 seconds into that 26 degrees. They are fiercely opposing each other. And this is the conflict in your life about the 10th house topics and 4th house topics. What does it mean to be a family man versus somebody who is good at what they do? All of that work pressure, all of that drive to succeed is in direct competition with the you time that you spend in the home. And that's a very difficult part of your chart, Brian. It's a nasty part of your chart that needs to be appreciated for what it is, a more intense kind of life schooling lesson about the need to balance. And the forces that you're balancing are, again, that 4th house topic of family and home, and that 10th house topic of being successful and good at what you do. And I think the medicine here, based on the planetary placements, is success is something that happens naturally over time. Yeah. If you're good at what you do and you keep chugging away and you play the tortoise game as opposed to the hare game, yeah, you'll be successful no matter what, and you'll be recognized for your value because you've put in the hours, you've done the work, you've made the reputation. Yeah. But if your family life is crumbling, if your private life is crumbling, if you feel like you're sacrificing who you or not who you are, but how you find comfort. Yeah. If you're sacrificing that ease, that maternal energy in the 4th house, that recharging of the mind, that nurturing quality of your Sun and Mercury and Cancer down in the 4th, I think you'll find that all of the 6th house, 10th house stuff of work and success, it really doesn't matter, Brian. It really, really doesn't. And that's a tough break. That's a really hard lesson to learn, especially because we have this square happening between the Moon in Libra and that Mercury in Cancer, and then we have a square happening between Mars and Venus. There's a lot of back and forth about creative efforts, about spending time with others, about doing your own thing versus doing things that feel quote unquote productive. Productivity is the enemy of comfort. That's a great summary of your chart in general. Like if there was one phrase that I could use to describe you, that would be it, is summarizing all of your life conflicts, summarizing all of the internal dynamics of your chart. Part of your life lesson is to understand how to be creative at home. We have this North Node in Leo, very, very close to Uranus in Leo, being ruled by that Sun in Cancer. And that North Node Uranus combo is in the 5th house of creativity, of parenting, of children, of sexuality, of creativity. There's so much in your chart that just begs you to explore what it's like to be a creator, what it's like to have a family dynamic that inspires you, what it's like to bring things into the world that are of your own, that you can say, I made that. But unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get to that metaphorical kind of pottery wheel if you're working yourself to the bone. Then you have no energy left for your creative impulses, and it's a catch-22 because that same energy that you would use for your creative impulses, Brian, would actually refuel you. Yeah, as opposed to the work, which tends to drain you and it activates some of those stubborn, more choleric earth placements. So we have, I'm messing that up. My brain just had a little bit of a fart with the humors. Had a little bit of humor talk. So when we look at your chart again, the idea of being too hyper-focused, the idea of work being the end all be all needs to be scrapped. You're going to be good at what you do regardless because of this placement in your chart. It's not going to happen until after 50, but once you hit that spot, you're going to start to realize, hey, there are more important things in life, and I really need to focus on being a good dad, raising the children, either children of your own or children in your community, and really being the ideal parent, but also pursuing creative endeavors that are shocking, that are interesting, that are flamboyant, that are deliciously expressive of who you are as a person and your more sensitive side, as opposed to being somebody who, again, gets chewed up and spat out by the daily grind of the work. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and keep chugging along for our charts. We've got about 12 minutes left and a couple charts to go. So let's go to Cody. Cody was born 12:37 p.m. in Tampa. Let's take a peek at Cody's chart. We've got a Sagittarius stellium up in the 10th. Super interesting. So Sagittarius is that energy that is that mutable fire. So it's creative fire. It's that idealistic striving. Whenever I describe Sagittarius to clients, especially Sagittarius in the 10th, the ruler is not in the 10th, the ruler is in the 9th. We'll talk about that. But when we look at Sagittarius in the 10th with Sag Sun, Mercury, Uranus, Neptune, MC, all in the 10th. It's this King Arthur complex that Cody has. Sagittarius is very much about, everything is equal. Everybody should be fair. There's always a pursuit towards the white picket fence. It's the dog chasing its tail analogy where we're just trying to get the thing, get the Holy Grail. Because if we get the Holy Grail, then everything will be okay and the kingdom will be all rainbows and fluffy bunnies. And that's not how it works. Unfortunately, when we get a lot of this kind of King Arthur Camelot mentality with Sagittarius in the chart, there's a little bit too much idealism, especially with Neptune here, who is prone to fantasy and delusions. Mercury, the mind, which is combust under the sun, so access to mental faculties is slightly covered, slightly hidden by the sun's ego rays. The ego clouds the mind is a good way to say it. And then Uranus is here making things unpredictable, but Sagittarius is already mutable fire. It's already pretty unpredictable. We don't need to add to that. So we have some overly fiery energy in Cody's chart, not to mention the moon in Aries in the 2nd house, making a trine to all of this stuff. So that moon representing the emotions, Aries being that initiatory sign that's always on fire with a new thing, making a trine to all of this other mutable fire. The chart is combusting a little bit too much. There's too much heat in the chart. There's too much fire that needs to be dampened down. So let's talk about how we would potentially dampen it down. And we would dampen it down with this ascendant in Pisces being ruled by Jupiter and Scorpio in the 9th. So the big thing that Cody needs to focus on is the 9th house topics of travel, foreigners, and higher education. This is where Cody's going to succeed. Essentially, the more classes that Cody takes, the more we'll activate the water principles in the chart, which will douse the fire, temper some of that heat, and allow a more even expansion of the chart. It's one of these things where, like, if we're trying to forge a sword out of Cody's chart, what's happening is he's leaving the metal in the fire too long, and the substance that makes up his life, those earthy, grounded qualities of practicality, they're melting. And by the time we pull the metal out of the fire, it's half the sword is gone and we've got nothing to work with, right? That's what happens in Cody's chart is everything gets burned up. The resources just stay in the fire too long. And because of that, there's nothing to work with when we pull that sword out of the furnace. But if we're able to get that sword out of the heat quick, like let it rest in the fire, let it heat up, let it warm, let those creative juices kind of fill the metal of Cody's life. But we need to pull that sword out, hammer it through some hard work and practical skill making, that learning quality of the 9th house, and then douse it in the fire of the ascendant in Pisces to get some of that fire to cool down, to get some of that knowledge to actually soak in, as opposed to next thing that Sagittarius and Aries are prone to do. We need to get a little bit more introspection, a little bit more empathy, a little bit more intuition, a little bit more reflectiveness. Some of the watery qualities of the chart need to be exemplified. Let's see. Oh, there's a mutual reception between Saturn and Venus. That's fun. So Saturn and Pluto are both in Libra in the 8th house of death, taxes, estates. And then Venus and the South Node are over here in Capricorn in the 11th house of friendship, social groups, and the tribe. Something that Cody would actually be really, really good at is surrounding himself with people who would be able to give financial advice, other business people, naturally being attracted to entrepreneurs, people who are going out of their way to do business. But people who are older, people who are more mature because of that Pluto-Saturn complex. We need mentorship in Cody's chart is a good way to say it, because Venus in Capricorn in the 11th would be, female friends especially, but friends who have that lovely quality of Venus, friends who are very soft and easy, but also have that fierce edge of Capricorn where they take no shit. And they're able to direct Cody in a way that is able to deflate some of that fire with that South Node in the 11th. So that mentorship that maybe is a little bit hard, but also a little bit tempering to Cody is what's very much needed. Interesting. One of the things that Cody's chart talks about is that North Node in Cancer in the 5th, that house of creativity, children, parenting. That North Node representing life's purpose, ruled by the Moon in Aries in the 2nd, making money through creative pursuits, potentially making money through creative pursuits, as well as, interestingly enough, like spending money on parents and children, understanding how family is an investment. Family is something that Cody's chart wants him to invest in, wants to understand that, although you're doing all this creative stuff, there are things that are thicker, more sustainable than all of this fire that's up in the 10th. Life is not about pursuing greatness. Life is about realizing greatness in the grassy field that you already have. It's that grass is greener complex with everything in the 10th. But what this North Node Moon combo is saying in Cody's chart is that, there has to be an appreciation of what your field is doing. The people, the family, the children that you surround yourself with are the gold of your life. There is no higher purpose other than taking care of those people financially. And if you allow that to be the priority and use some practicality to temper the fire in the chart, that's really how we activate some of those principles. Yeah. I think that's pretty much a good summary of Cody's chart. There are relationship things which are connected to the success. We have let's talk about relationship stuff. So we have this seventh house Mars ruling the 2nd house of finance, so receiving money from relationships, but also we have Mercury and Sagittarius ruling that Mars Virgo in the 7th. So spouses who have a lot of wealth, have a lot of success, who are able to trickle down that wealth into Cody's life. Definitely something that we see in Cody's chart from a financial perspective, although money might be a little bit difficult from his perspective because that moon doesn't necessarily like to be in Aries, and it's caught between an opposition between Pluto and Saturn. We do have this tendency of money coming most easily through relationships and through spousal relationships, where the spouse is actually working much harder, while Cody potentially pursues the creative endeavor or is like a stay-at-home dad because of that North Node in the 5th house of children. Cool. Awesome. Let's go ahead and continue to go on. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. Hey, Melina, how you doing? We've got one more chart and only 3 minutes, so we're gonna go over. I apologize to everybody. But let's go to Elizabeth's charts. Elizabeth's charts. Elizabeth was born 4:34 p.m. in Lynn. Let's take a peek. So we've got that ascendant in Scorpio in Elizabeth's chart. Oh, that's interesting. We've already had this combination. The ascendant in Scorpio with Cancer, the ruler of the chart, Mars, in Cancer up in the 9th house. But there's a different dynamic here. We have the North Node. We have the North Node in Scorpio here. And we also have Venus up in the 9th as well. Interesting. One of the things that we see with the ruler of the chart in the 9th is there's an identification with the concepts of the 9th house. Wherever the ruler of the chart is, that means that house's qualities are infused into the personality. It's a very core part of who that person is. As an example, I have Scorpio rising as well, but my Mars is in Aries in the 6th house of work, health, and pets. That's part of my core identity. Where we have in Elizabeth's chart, Mars is in Cancer, the sign of its detriment, and it's up in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, and spirituality. Those are the 9th house topics that are kind of tattooed on Elizabeth's soul, is a good way to say it. We also have Venus in Cancer here. So there's a lot of maternal aspects. I see this a lot in people who have a pursuit of feminine studies, because that Venus mother Cancer energy, that octomom energy is very much in the 9th house of higher learning. But also people, some clients that I've seen who have similar placements, they run an Airbnb, and they rent out their home to other people who are travelers, again, foreigners, travelers, but also they are caregivers, that Cancer element, especially with Venus in Cancer. That might be an interesting way for money to happen. I'm just checking a couple other placements in the chart real quick. Jupiter is in the 11th, ruling that second house of finance. So we would have potential for large groups there. The moon in Aquarius in the 4th, being ruled by, actually, it would be a really good fit for Elizabeth to run like an Airbnb, or work out of her home, get money from her home, have her home base tie into her income in some way, shape, or form, staying local, taking care of other people's in a local environment, potentially foreigners or people who travel to her place of residence to have an experience of the local culture, that kind of stuff. That's how we pair a lot of these house placements. What else do we see? We see the Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini, both in the 8th house. This gives us an entrepreneurial spirit because the 8th house is business. It also gives us a little bit of psychic mediumship abilities because Mercury is that communicator in its home sign of Gemini in the 8th house of death, as well as I see with Scorpio on the ascendant, the ruler of the Scorpio house of self in that 9th house of spirituality, paired with Mercury in Gemini. There's a lot of intuitive faculties of speaking with the dead in Elizabeth's chart. But I think the key themes of Elizabeth's chart are getting money from foreigners, working with people who are in that higher education, travel, foreigner space, potentially earning income from the home because of that fourth second house connection. The ruler of that 5th house of family, children, creativity is in that 11th house of social groups, tribes, humanitarian efforts. There's so much caregiving in Elizabeth's chart, but caregiving that is very focused and pointed and dealing with people who don't feel safe in their own home, who are traveling or who are moving or who are in transit from their home base. Elizabeth is uniquely qualified to kind of wrap them up in a nice warm blanket, take them into her space, and allow them to feel comfortable within themselves. We do have Pluto and Uranus here, as well as the MC and Leo up in the 10th house of success, being ruled by the Sun in the 8th. So being successful for Elizabeth has a couple different flavors, but they all point back to that 8th house of business, of death, of taxes, estates. Working within the estate field, again, ties into using the home as leverage for the business. It all comes back down to home, finances, caregiving, travel. All of these themes just keep repeating. And this is something that I love to see in a chart, really, because it's no matter where we go in the chart, we're met with the same things. We're met with the exact same points that keep circling back over and over and over. And really, to kind of top it all off, we have that North Node in the first. I think one of the things that if Elizabeth is struggling to find life direction, really it's back to working on the self. It's back to that higher learning of the 9th. It's back to understanding you are really mastering you in this lifetime, and understanding that your skills are constantly in development. You never really get it done. It's not something that you cross the finish line and then life will be easy, life will be happy. No, it's a constant effort, it's a constant working, it's a constant rehashing, it's a constant reflection of working on who you are and why you want to be here, and what promises you made kind of coming into the life experience. So as long as you work within the parameters of your chart and continue to develop the self, we really have a good chance for a lot of fun and positive things to happen, interacting with, again, home, foreigners, money, higher education, travel, that kind of stuff. Excellent. So thank you, everybody, for jumping on for the latest round of Astro-Babble. I'm deleting a couple comments now in the deleting a couple comments on Facebook. Please do not post birth dates, places, and times in the comments. Violation of privacy. Instead, private message me them only. So if you would like to be in the queue, just send your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and I will add you to the queue. We've got a long list. Thank you, everybody who's continuing to view, share, like, send charts my way. Absolutely love you. I post all these live streams on YouTube. Just in YouTube, search for ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. Don't search Scorpio Rising Astrology because there's a lot of astrology stuff on YouTube, but just ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, the website. My channel will come up. You'll be able to see the previous videos. I'll link to this live stream on YouTube, as well as the previous live streams, in the comments on the Facebook Live. Check out the Instagram as well, where my daily posts are. I know that Facebook can get a little bit weird with the algorithms. Sometimes people complain that they're not seeing my daily forecast posts anymore, but that's because Facebook changed the algorithms again or whatever. So check out Instagram at Scorpio Rising Astrology, and yeah, we'll continue doing the queue as long as we have charts, and we got a boatload of charts. So I will message you when your chart is up and let you know where you are in the queue that morning. And we'll just keep doing the charts because I love the Astro-Babble and everybody's really enjoying it. So until next time, may the stars be ever in your favor.